Do you have a new kitty here?
I've got a special guest kitty. Actually, two guest kitties on this recording.
What are the names?
Sammy and Louie. One of them's black, one of them's Tuxedo Cat. They've been very nice, and they're hanging out.
Named after Sammy Davis Jr. and Louis Gossett Jr.
And Louis Davis Jr., yes.
This time, we're talking about Season 2, Episode 10, King Dinosaur.
But first, follow-up of the familial variety. My brother, who I mentioned, and his band, Emblem, as referenced in Episode 2 on Danger Death Ray, just got a shout-out from none other than John Michael Thor of Zombie Nightmare fame.
Wow.
On his Facebook page. Yeah, I'm as stunned as anybody. I asked my brother because, like, my brother's open for a few bands, perhaps most notably Canadian moron superstars Anvil. But I asked him, like, is John Michael Thor part of your posse now? Like, what's going on? Are you opening for him? He's like, I have no idea. He apparently has heard of us now and made a big Facebook announcement about it.
But that's not all that's new in your life.
No.
I hear you've been moonlighting on other podcasts, Adam.
That's true. My friend Jordan Shear, on whose podcast Jordan is Genius, I most recently appeared for a Halloween special that we're now slightly late mentioning, once dubbed me a podcast whore, for I will appear on anything. And that appears to be true. I showed up on that Halloween special, I think initially to talk about horror movies, but I ended up telling a story about how an ex-girlfriend of mine took me to Alabama to visit the grave of a comedian. Was it my own? Tune in to find out. There's a link in the show notes. It was actually Bill Hicks's grave. Anyway.
He died in Alabama?
He didn't die in Alabama, but he was buried there, which is a whole other mystery that we didn't solve. But visiting that grave, it was like, wow. This would have been like really impressive and like important, I think, if I was like 15. I was like, whoa, I'm visiting the grave of a poet. Let's leave some cigarettes for him in heaven. Whereas, as a 30-something, I'm like, oh, a lot of your work is dated, but some of it is pretty good. And it's sad that you died as young as you did, I guess. Why are you in Alabama? But on top of that, I also, I think I mentioned this, but it finally came out. I was the resident Donald Pleasance expert on an episode of the Fiasco Brothers Watch a Movie, aka Dial T for Fiasco, where we talked about the great Donald Pleasance versus Cannibals movie, Raw Meat.
Does he survive it?
He does. He lives to tell the tale. I'm more amused by the fact that the cannibal man who gets his victims from the London Underground looks exactly like comic book writer Alan Moore.
Oh, well, that's appropriate.
Yeah.
If anyone was going to be a cannibal, it'd be Alan Moore.
I like to worship Glycon in the London Underground and eat human flesh.
Also, producer Chris will be hanging out at PodCon in Seattle. So if any listeners are around, drop us a line and say hi.
Yeah. And if you are in Seattle, can you tell me about the tossed salads and scrambled eggs, which I hear that place is so famous for?
I hear a lot of people are sleepless there. There's a lot of insomnia going around.
Mm-hmm. Something, you've got mail.
That wasn't in Seattle, was it?
I don't think it was. But one of those was the movie that the Cry Wilderness director helped out with. So It all comes out in the wash.
Also, season 12! Now Mystery Science Theater 3000 will be going into a 12th season. Isn't that exciting? It
is, especially where they were pretty mum about whether or not season 12 was happening for a long time. And there was kind of a neither confirm nor deny the existence of season 12 coming from the official sources. So I imagine a lot of people are just relieved to know it's like, oh, it hasn't been canceled or it's not been moved to Hulu or something. So how do you think Netflix makes decisions about redoing other seasons? I think part of it is renew anything that Kevin Spacey's not in.
Oh.
If a Wachowski has done it, it's probably too expensive, so you might as well cancel it. MST3K, I think, probably occupies a really sweet spot in that enough people are watching it to make it worthwhile, and it's potentially attracting people to the service. but it's also not going to be that crazy expensive once you get past like the licensing and maybe certain actors' fees. That's about it. So this is a pleasant surprise. Like, I figured it would happen, but I was almost expecting the announcement of like Joel kind of hat in hand going, it's like, well, we're getting a season 12 on our new home, shoutfactory.com.
What else is going on? Oh, you and I went to see another bad movie, wonderful thing, The Flophouse.
Yes, the podcast of head writer of MST3K, The Return, Elliott Kalan, amongst bad boy Stuart Wellington and sad boy Dan McCoy.
I want to date all of them.
Oh, like at the same time for a weird night?
We'll do a rotating basis, but they're just all so cute and sweet and funny.
Yes.
This is a danger of podcasts, eh? You feel way too close to the people you listen to.
Yeah, we have a weird, unhealthy attachment to all concerned, including the fictional cat who co-hosts the Flophouse.
So any listeners out there, we are actually in real life dreadful people, so don't get too attached.
Yeah, I am a walking combination of a number of mental illnesses that makes me highly unpleasant.
And I am incapable of joy.
It's true.
Speaking of the Flophouse, it's Elliott's birthday. And interestingly enough, we are doing his favorite episode, so more on that in a bit.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, how about do it right now? So, once again, we watch Season 2, Episode 10, King Dinosaur.
But before that, a short. X Marks the Spot is a dramatization of the famous 1944 court case, Dokes v. Heaven, where Joseph Dokes of New Jersey was tried for reckless driving. In this It's Just a Show exclusive, we have a statement from the Angel of Death about why he targeted Dokes. I am the spirit of dark and lonely highways, ready to trap the unwary, the show-off, the fool. The show-offs are easy, but Robert Mitchum-looking 1940s guys are easier still, and they never expect to find me in the suburbs. Dokes was escorted to Cloud Court after the crash, and his lifetime of bad driving was reviewed by God. By God. It turns out this trial was a test for Dokes' guardian angel, who was relieved of his sentence of eternal servitude by mitigating factors like good behavior and a lovable New Jersey accent. The guardian angel retired to heaven, and Dokes, figuring it's better to serve in heaven than rule in hell, took the angel's place. Another miscarriage of justice in the revolving door court system of Christian heaven. Taking a moment to bend God's ear, Dokes asks why the creator of all life doesn't prevent traffic accidents. Turns out God can make a car so big even he couldn't lift it. While Judge Almighty was famously coy on the whole free will thing, that charismatic and unforgettable angel of death offered this statement and threat. Sensible drivers, I have no power over them. I'll be back.
And now, the movie! An authoritative, disembodied voice breathlessly sportscasts the rapid progress in space exploration, which leads to a daring plan to send a team of astronauts to the mysterious planet Nova. Our heroes are as follows: Dr. Richard Gordon, zoologist; Dr. Nora Pierce, geologist; Dr. Ralph Martins, doctor; and Dr. Patricia Bennett, chemist. Full disclosure, the last two are something of an item. The rocket successfully lands on the oddly familiar-looking planet, and the astronauts discover that not only does Nova have breathable air, but it is also positively teeming with Earth-like life forms, practically begging to be shot. Big insects, big snakes, big lizards that we're pretending are dinosaurs, you get the picture. The gang enjoys some light hiking and camping, and they even manage to befriend a friendly kinkajou, not a lemur, who they name Joe. But inevitably, things start to fall apart, or, to put it more accurately, the women cause things to fall apart. First, Patricia lures her paramour Ralph into the woods for a makeout session, but Ralph trips, falls into a gully, and gets attacked by a crocodile. Then Nora nags Richard into finally taking her to that island she won't stop yammering about, which it turns out is populated by kaiju. Even though all 4 astronauts successfully escape the island and can theoretically leave in their rocket ship without having to irradiate the planet, they do it anyway because why pack an atom bomb if you're not going to use it?
Meanwhile, on the satellite of love, we open with Joel and Crow trying their hands at freeform poetry. In Deep 13, Dr. Forrester works on the elevator while Frank gets ready for his hat party.
Mine's going to be the grandest of all.
Resident button pusher Frank pushes the elevator button while Dr. F is still in the shaft, crushing the mad scientist. A shovel is used to scrape the splat Forrester from the Florister. In a bit of Tex Avery logic, Forrester is very much alive but crushed down to a head, feet, and hands attached to an itty-bitty torso. He resembles a live-action Goomba. From Super Mario the game, not the live-action movie. Dr. F offers his terrifying new form as this week's invention exchange, while Joel presents the latest in chemical warfare, dirty socks. After the short, Crow considers how to contribute in society. In keeping with his personality as the Satellite Love's resident bad boy, Crow suggests policing the lives of those around you, imposing your ideals on others, and crushing someone with an emotional word or an enigmatic look. Joey the Lemur makes his terrifying debut in segment 3. Joel does his ventriloquist act while the bots sing about and are accosted by Joey. In segment 4, a frustrated Joel abandons the bots' emotional scientist sketch. Crow fills in as Marie Curie, but drops the sketch just shy of a period. Tensions run high, but the gang make up with a group hug. After the movie, the bots nix Joel's tribute to Robert Lippert. Instead, letters are read, a theremin is played, and a fully healed Dr. Forrester slams TV's Frank's head onto the button, ending this week's experiment.
This is Elliott Kalan's favorite episode. We have a quote here from him. So he asks himself, why put a solid but not exactly groundbreaking or spectacular episode at number 1? Well, remember that I never said these were the best. I said these were my favorites. And this is my favorite episode because it's also the first episode of MST3K I ever saw. One very historic Friday night at midnight after divine intervention of some sort led me to discover that yes, we did get Comedy Central on my cable package. This was instantly my favorite series in television history, the only one that could fill a need I didn't even realize I had until it was part of my life.
I felt exactly the same way when I first discovered this show. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I saw the movie and then I saw Pod People and I was like, yes, this is for me.
Agreed. It just absolutely filled a void that I did not even realize was there. It was amazing.
Yeah. I think I had a very lucky experience because I think a lot of people are initially put off by the handmade charm of MST3K that appeals to a, I think, very select portion of MST3K's already small, or cultish, I should say, audience. And MST3K, the movie, is a much more polished version of that. It's still low budget, but they're at least, trying to hide the wires of things. The sets look nice. It's on film instead of video. And so it was a great presentation of the concept. And then Pod People, which is just bursting with weirdness, such as the sketch where they reenact the very confusing, poorly written pop song from the beginning, and Frank's even donning that amazing "I'm a Virgin" t-shirt. And I gotta say, no one does like withering deadpan sarcasm better than Frank Conniff, just with the way, just the sheer disdain he says, good, he's the best.
It's funny because even though I really enjoyed my first episode I ever saw, Bride of Monsters is not one of my favorites. They ended up, it just ended up getting better and better after that.
It's funny. I would say that that's true of me as well, because I saw the movie, which I really like, and Pod People was, again, a really nice introduction to Joel and the weird sensibility that he brings to the show. But I would also say that's also not a favorite episode of mine, even though that has always been the top 10 or top 20 of the show in terms of fan polls and whatnot. But going back to that weirdness, that's something that Elliott highlighted, which made me feel like we were two of a kind, because he mentions in that same article one particular segment in which Joel operates a puppet named Joey the Lemur was so rambling and inexplicable that I instantly memorized it. It was funny, it was strange, it was sweet, it felt like home, which is exactly how I felt when I watched the show. It felt right somehow the first time I saw it. It felt like my sensibilities on screen in a way.
Yeah, I agree. There was nothing else like it. It just felt instantly comfortable.
And I can't help but ask. So Elliott has put it down as, solid, but not exactly groundbreaking or spectacular. And how did you find it now watching King Dinosaur, I think, for the first time?
It was not great. It's kind of an example of why I tend to avoid season 2 episodes. It's just a bit spacious. And it's just interesting to note that this was one of the, 4th or 5th Lippert episodes that they did?
Yeah.
It just seemed like their selections back then were less interesting. Right? Because if you have to go with really dull and plotting 50s movies where they just walk around a lot, I mean, it suggests that you didn't have anything more interesting to pull from. So I think that might be, it might not be that they weren't up to the task, but this is just a really dull movie.
I often find with MST3K that the duller the better, as some of my favorite experiments are Monster a Go-Go and the Coleman Francis trilogy.
Oh yeah, but those are so dull it comes out the other way and becomes interesting again.
Yeah, I would say that all 4 of those movies have a dose of insanity that King Dinosaur lacks and is very standard fare.
They're so dull that you go through a fugue state.
Yeah. Even movies that aren't so painful, like Pod People, movies that are just weird that I never would have seen or heard of. And even though that's not my favorite episode, Pod People is not one of my favorites. It's such a memorable movie. It's such a bizarre experience that it got me to seek out that director's other works. And I've now seen most of Juan Pico Simon's other movies.
Well, I would agree with that. Like, I one of the things I love about watching MST3K is that exposure to the weird and the way that, especially watching period movies, can get a sense of what that period was like in a way that a good movie can't, because it's not exceptional in any way. So you're just like, oh, so this is what like it was from day to day. People just walking around with guns all the time. Okay.
The great thing about watching anything, if you're removed enough from it, and you can even find this with, say, movies you grew up with or movies from that time period, or even movies from like 5 to 10 years ago, is that they are doorways to the culture at the time, even in little ways.
And more than that, a doorway to the culture that normally you wouldn't access, like, because it would normally be the really good stuff, the exceptional stuff, the stuff that's groundbreaking that makes it into the present, right?
Yes.
So there's something strangely revealing about finding the dreck.
Yeah. And I think that MST3K specializes in finding that wonderful dreck that tells us about our past and ourselves. But speaking of discovering something kind of new and special and weird, I love this episode.
Of course.
I have discovered. I had never seen it before. I thought maybe I had in one of the Turkey Day marathons, but I don't think they ever did this one. They definitely did Lost Continent, because I remember a segment that Joel did for, I think it was 2014. There'll be a link in the show notes, in which they got the Tom and Crow to dress up as dinosaurs, and they reenacted like the very poor man's Ray Harryhausen stop motion fight from that film. But while this is not even Burt I. Gordon's most interesting movie by any stretch of the imagination, Gordon being the director of this film, who MST3K will have a very long relationship with, even though it's not the most spectacular or even most personal, so to speak, of Gordon's giant creature features. There is such a weirdness and energy from word one, whether it's in the riffs, like when the title credit comes up, or not even the title credit, but in the credits of the short, where you just see it's like, and who is the commissioner? Arthur W. McGee. And it's not even really that much of a joke, but it's delivered in such a way that like the show has already clicked. I feel like the show kind of arrived only in 201, like with Rocket Ship XM. I really like a lot of season 2 and all of it that I've seen. And the sketches, like, I don't know how good the season 1 sketches are. They were surprisingly good in The Crawling Eye, but they're super weird and fun here. And they really hit a fever pitch with the wrongly sequenced, but they went ahead anyway, Joey the Lemur sketch. Which is peak Joel, because not only is it a weird idea that is more about committing to the weirdness of the idea and seeing how it goes, and it even kind of like trails off in the exact same way that they would kind of perfect later on with like the Warrior of the Lost World Goes Driving sketch.
Yeah, where the funny is how bad it's failing.
and how tense it's getting.
Yeah.
Like it's bringing out tension among the characters, as this does, as Joel is being downright abusive with his puppet. And in another sense, it's also peak Joel because he flubs so many lines in that sketch in particular. And it's just like, no, it's perfect. No time for retakes. Let's keep going. And it's great. It kind of goes back to what we were saying with the Flophouse. It's like, makes you just want to hang out with these guys. And I liked that there seemed to be stuff that would just be cut from a show, possibly even in its form now, with season 11 and presumably season 12, where there was just like little bits of personality and weirdness that weren't necessarily like the strongest notes to end on, but were still funny notes and were made funnier for like ending on that particular bit. I love this. Yeah, this was a total unknown for me, and now I'm like, this is an MVP episode. I love this. I love King Dinosaur.
It sounds like you really like the sketches. What did you think of the movie riffs? Did you have a particularly favorite moment that stuck out for you?
There is one joke that is so silly and dumb when the credit comes up that there's a crew member named Tom Grise. Joel says, Tom Grise, and the whole world gries with him. And I paused the recording. I paused the YouTube video because I howled at that for longer than I should have.
As I said, I found this a little bit too spacious for me, but there was a particular moment I found very charming where there's no dialogue. There's just some of that goofy orchestral music you get in 50s movies, and Tom Servo just starts singing over it. This is my box.
This is my radio.
Because there's literally nothing going on. They're just passing things to each other. And his like wistful off-key kind of intonation. It was very sweet. So this short is one of a kind that was made a lot in the 40s and 50s, where it's basically an extended PSA about what you're doing wrong as a citizen. This one has to be about how you need to be a better driver, because otherwise you'll get punished in heaven for your driving.
And rather than take on the rules of the road in a straightforward manner, there's a prologue about the war effort. Then it just goes off into It's a Wonderful Life territory where a guardian angel helps out our down on his luck hero, I guess. The guy who is just a reckless driver and has the most conventional 1940s guy face I've ever seen.
Yeah. There's two really things I find really interesting about this movie. One is just the concern for car safety and driving, because I don't think of America as being a place that cares about safety. You know, it's the place that is freedom, and freedom means running over other people and shooting other people, because that's your freedom. No offense, Americans. But I mean, they legendarily pushed against making seatbelt laws mandatory.
I'm sure it was dismissed as communism at the time.
Well, this is pre like the Red Scare, so maybe that's why you could get away with stuff like this in the 40s. Plus the war effort, that was a time when people were more communitarian minded, and you know, you need to sacrifice for your country and you have to stay in line, which is interesting because during the war there was a big dip in car accidents, probably because all the men were gone. But anyway,
boom.
The second thing I find really interesting about this movie is just how boring heaven looks.
Yeah.
Like, heaven is a bureaucracy.
It's not even a nice looking courtroom.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't want to go to heaven if this is what it looks like.
Oh man, if that's heaven, then just heaven and God sucks. I'm sorry. It's time to embrace either better gods, non-existence, or a life burning in the fires of hell. They must have nicer sets.
Maybe. I mean, my favorite short of all has this too, where heaven is bureaucratized, and that's Once Upon a Honeymoon.
I can honestly say that I've seen more visually compelling Philadelphia cream cheese commercials when it comes to the depiction of heaven.
Do you drive, Adam?
I don't. I am deathly afraid of driving.
Well, you should be.
Yeah, according to this, like some goddamn angels follow me around all the place, guilting me into getting my car checked. I mean, my God, I have enough problems.
Well, I mean, car accidents are one of the examples why human beings are so terrible at assessing risk, because if you were good at it, you would never step foot in a car. It is like the most likely way to die if you are under 54.
And 54 too. That explains why so many elderly people are such good drivers.
But I drive. I actually enjoy driving quite a bit. But I have been in a car accident and it was my fault. So
Oh, wow.
I was this guy, just somebody who is a little bit too sure of herself, kind of arrogant on the road, prone to road rage. And in this particular case, I was driving through my hometown, which isn't very big, and I ran the one light in town and T-boned somebody when I was 19. It was very scary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, did you learn from that, or are you still a road rage person who gets very irritated and always rushes everywhere?
No, I'm still a little ragey, but I'm a lot more cautious and I pay a lot more attention now.
I've always been really, really scared of driving, just because, like, as a child, the concept of a car accident or causing a car accident, even worse, was so horrifying to me and caused me such guilt to even imagine it. That it was a recurring nightmare. And it's still a nightmare that I have, is that I am behind the wheel, even though I don't know how to drive, and I'm just somehow driving a car in a real Herbie Goes Bananas situation, I guess. And I ended up causing like a horrible accident and killing a bunch of people. It's this real horrible fear that I have. So this, as we have mentioned, continues a big tradition in season 2, abandoned later, of pillaging the filmography of one Robert Lippert. There are a number of Lippert movies, and they're all done in season 2, to the point where he's almost set up to be the show's nemesis, even more than Roger Corman or Bert I. Gordon would be. He was a Poverty Row producer, and there was even like a whole section in California that was sort of known as the Poverty Row Studios. So, picture studios like Monogram, in the 30s and 40s could make these really minuscule, low budget movies. And essentially it was kind of like maybe slightly more advanced than Corman, in the sense that you might have had more than a week to shoot something. At least comparatively. But that's where you get all of these ropey productions, and that's where you get Lippert Productions. Lippert, I think, is interesting more for where he came from, and in an interesting, if true, bit of trivia that I found from IMDb, the source of all things true. Apparently, Lippert was the first to serve popcorn in a movie theater, for he was a cinema magnate and owned a bunch of movie theaters.
Interesting. So the movies were made to serve the movie theater, not the other way around.
Well, he apparently, during the Great Depression, came up with a bunch of theme nights, one of which was listed as Dish Night. I'm not sure what that means. I have gone to a midnight screening of Plan 9 from Outer Space, where you throw paper plates at the screen in honor of the UFOs, but that was long, long after Lippert's theater chain days. But yeah, he owned like hundreds of these things, and I found out why he got into making movies. Now, Beth, if you were a prospective producer and director, why would you, a person with a dream, why would you make movies?
Because I had a vision about something that I wanted to express in real life, I guess. I've always wanted to be able to be like, what color filter would I use on this particular shot in my mind,
Well, in the case of Lippert, I think most of his movies were tinted green, at least for one reel, as was the case, I believe, or red. In the case of Rocket Ship XM. But yeah, he would do that film tinting thing. But yeah, Robert Lippert got into it because of spite. He refused to put up with the major studios, as every time he came asking for a big deal major event motion picture, he would just get the B pictures and the two-reeler comedies and things like that. And he was getting fed up with it. And apparently only that, is what motivated him to do it. So, cue that voice clip of Bender from Futurama saying, "I'm going to make my own moon with blackjack and hookers."
Oh, well, this makes me like him even less, because he's just basically Hal P. Warren. I'll show you.
That was basically it. I guess, you can take some solace in knowing that what people consider to be his greatest achievement at least as far as movies that carry his name, is Rocket Ship XM, which we watched for the very, very first episode of this podcast. And that movie is atrocious.
Really bad.
It is an unforgivably bad picture. And the movie that he directed, Last of the Wild Horses, is no better. And that's why it ended up on this show much later. But he did have his name on a few other movies, and he really did try to break in to the major studios and become a producer, I guess, of note, and would perhaps be allowed to play with money, because most people would give, say, Roger Corman a chance when they figured out just how good he was with money and what he could do with very, very little. I think with Lippert, he has little, but he shows even less. There's not even the illusion that there's like a lot of craft and talent when you watch something like this movie. It's funny, I mentioned the Rocket Ship XM episode that, you know, a better movie of the time and a better piece of 50s sci-fi was the original The Fly. But it turns out that that had uncredited production by Robert Lippert.
Well, he's really good at finding stock footage.
Yep, that's his biggest talent. Maybe he's good at sweet-talking Vincent Price, because he wanted to adapt Richard Matheson's great novel, I Am Legend, which has been adapted many times, most recently with Will Smith. And all the adaptations are, I will say, wrong. They're not reflective of the novel at all, but he made arguably the worst adaptation with Vincent Price called The Last Man on Earth. And if he was adapting Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, then you have theoretically cast Vincent Price as the last man on Earth, a vampire hunter. And Vincent Price Vampire Hunter sounds like a rad movie, and an even radder musical that had not been made. Instead, Price is given the kind of like straight, serious lead role. And so there's just like endless monologues about, I am alone, over and over and over again. And it just, it's such a waste.
Yep, sounds like Lippert.
Now, Beth, I understand you have a treat for us, because one Trace Beaulieu has a certain and specific contribution to the Amazing Colossal episode guide.
So Trace Beaulieu does not have a lot of presence in this guide. He must have been already on the way out when this was being written. But he did create a cute little kind of side project where he put together a legend for particular movie monsters. And it's called MST3K Monsters. And then it's basically, he sets it up as if he's giving like a genus and species kind of breakdown for each monster. So, for King Dinosaur. Kingdom, giant rogue critter. Well, small critters actually. Shot in a very convincing way so that we, the viewer, actually believe them to be huge. Genus, Dino. Species, pet shop purchase. AKA Ron. Special powers, biting. Weakness, fins have a tendency to fall off. Note, one of the more creatively cheap Dino FX. Robert Lippert, I love you.
That's the only time that's ever been said.
So, one of the reasons I haven't brought up these MST3K monster bits before is they're not that funny, frankly.
Burn! I hope you stop listening, Trace. Oh no.
I mean, I don't know how you could make this really funny, but I really liked the insight into Trace Beaulieu and why I felt like something really was lost in the show when he left, because I think, like Joel, he has a genuine love of these movies. He thinks that they're charming and amusing. You know, he doesn't hate them.
Well, it's just it's more an unfortunate coincidence, I think, than anything else. But with Joel, Frank, and Trace leaving in that order and so quickly, so close next to each other, you had like the three biggest champions of these kinds of movies all kind of leave the show in one fell swoop.
Yeah, that's another thing. There's some great, and I haven't had an opportunity to do it yet, but Frank also has kind of a side panel about his encounters with the movies, and they're really interesting. Like, you get to get a sense of Frank as a writer and the kinds of things that he finds interesting. I can't wait until we get to Starfighters and his take on that particular gem. But yeah, so I'll maybe bring them up in the future. But like I said, these are not always laugh out loud funny bits, so I haven't brought them up all that often yet. So there were giant monsters in this movie, in that they took a couple lizards and shot them from the ground.
Trick photography. Movie magic, I think they call it. My God, Beth. It was like someone filmed a train and I thought it was coming right at me with these giant dinosaurs.
So the dinosaurs in this movie include a giant iguana, a small crocodile, a monitor lizard, and an Indonesian tegu lizard, according to my source. And probably a lot of them were hurt while this was being filmed.
Yeah, this doesn't really seem like a PETA-friendly picture.
When the iguana is pitted against the crocodile, I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Iguanas are vegetarians, and he just gets rooked. Like I actually doubt whether the iguana survived the picture. That's how badly he gets beat up.
Yeah, and as much as I'm usually a proponent for director's cuts, this is one case where I really would want to see one.
Yeah,
it's pretty brutal, but it's also a reminder because it's funny. Like they add bits to the iguana. Like the iguana has cardboard on him. So to my mind, it's like, oh, that's the king dinosaur, I guess. I never thought even though I was really, really keeping my fingers crossed that my guess last episode that it was a brontosaurus with a crown was going to be the king dinosaur, because that would have ruled. But it's funny you mentioned that the croc is one of the dinosaurs, and it's like, you know what, it didn't even register, but yeah, of course, like they shoot it so that it is also gigantic, hence the iguana fight. But it never even occurred to me that the movie was presenting that as a dinosaur. It was as if it was just saying, it's like, oh yeah, there's giant crocodiles here too. Everything's big, like that spider. Maybe the movie considers all of the creatures, including the kinkajou, to be dinosaurs.
So what they tried to do with the iguana is that, I don't know how they did it, but they got him upright for a couple shots.
Yeah.
And in that upright position, I guess it kind of looks like a T-Rex, but it doesn't have any teeth.
I mean, I think it kind of looks like a carnosaur.
Yeah, okay,
I'll give you
carnosaur.
That. It could pass for a Richard Carnosaur, but yeah, it's not the most convincing dinosaur that I've seen. But then again, you know, this was a different time. And people had a very different idea of what dinosaurs looked like in these times, it seems.
So this was the 50s, and so the dino craze that came into the culture hadn't really hit yet, and so there actually wasn't a lot of speculative pictures about what dinosaurs look like. Producer Chris actually found a really interesting mock-up of some dinosaurs from the 19th century from the Crystal Palace. Now, do you know what the Crystal Palace was, Adam?
No, it sounds like a hidden level in a Sonic the Hedgehog game, so I'm sure I'm going to love it.
Well, it's right in my Victorian wheelhouse. It was an exhibition in 1851, and the entire exhibition, which was massive, it was supposed to be a world exhibition, was entirely under a greenhouse, basically. And it was the size of like 2 or 3 city blocks or something like that. Like, it was absolutely massive. Now, the original Crystal Palace was a trade exhibition, like just showing various trade stuff around the world. But then later on, they moved it and turned it into a kind of proto-museum, and this is when they brought the dinosaurs in. And the dinosaurs look basically like if you crossed an iguana with an elephant. Like, they look very lumbering and dumb, which makes sense because if the only big things you have around are elephants, then you're probably going to imagine these big reptiles as having a similar kind of body to them.
Yeah, they're vaguely dog-like. And it's true, like that was the weirdest thing, because I remember thinking, it's like, well, surely people knew what dinosaurs looked like because King Kong, the 1933 King Kong, has like T-Rexes in it, and that's more or less compatible with our ideas of what a T-Rex looks like. But then again, they're always disproving what our ideas are of dinosaurs. Like, not the Brontosaurus, but isn't the Stegosaurus now no longer a dinosaur?
What? No, that's news to me.
Oh, I thought it went through a Pluto thing where it's like, that's not what this pile of bones look like.
It was the Brontosaurus, and it's back.
Oh, good. Whew.
Yeah, it's back. So the Brontosaurus, and then they thought they had the wrong head on it, so it was called an Apatosaurus for a while, and then they brought it back. We're like, no, actually, the original one was right. And I was going to bring up the Brontosaurus because that's one of the examples of what was kind of the idea of a dinosaur for a long time. Have you seen the famous animated clip Gertie the Dinosaur?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you'll notice that that Gertie is a brontosaurus and it has very elephant-like feet.
Yeah, come to think of it, when I was a kid, whenever there would be like drawings of dinosaurs in, non-scientific books and just kind of like little kids' books, they were always drawn with pachyderm feet.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least that was really common anyway.
And I'm going to put it in the show notes because I absolutely love this YouTube clip that gives you a scale model of all the known dinosaurs and just how freaking huge they get. But even more interesting is how it adapts new ideas about dinosaur coloring and especially feathers and just how bird-like the dinosaurs might have been. So, and it has a really cool soundtrack. So we're going to put that one in the show notes.
Sold. I want to see this. Now, I should ask, though, because I don't think we ever got into this. Aside from the Brontosaurus, the original king dinosaur, what is your favorite dinosaur, Beth?
I like Triceratops.
Triceratops is also a good choice. There's not really any bad choices in the dinosaur family.
I don't know. My sister loves ankylosaurs.
I can see that. I can see that.
They're like the rooks of like the chessboard. They just kind of sit there.
The only dinosaur I don't like is Baby Sinclair, but I refuse to love that. But my favorite dinosaur, and I sincerely hope that it hasn't been shunted aside and deemed apocryphal, is the Archaeopteryx, the feathered flying dinosaur.
Oh, there were lots of feathered flying dinosaurs apparently. So, but yes, if you need an example that evolution doesn't know what it's doing, here it is. Let's try this one out.
That creature existed only to be featured on a as yet unmade Yes album cover.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It is time for the Shallow 13. 13 fun facts about both this episode of MST3K and the movie King Dinosaur. But there's only so much time. The clock is ticking. Go, Beth, go!
According to Ron Lackman's The Encyclopedia of Radio, King Dinosaur director Bert I. Gordon got his start in showbiz as a radio comedian who specialized in playing the wacky foreign archetype, the Mad Russian. This is a fact that gets repeated a lot, but it's a trivia lie. Radio actor Bert Gordon died in 1974, while Bert I. Gordon, note the initial, celebrated his 95th birthday this September.
Do the dulcet tones of King Dinosaur narrator Marvin Miller sound familiar? Miller was a prominent, often uncredited voice actor, best known for providing the voice of Robbie the Robot in the classic 1956 film Forbidden Planet. Miller would reprise the role for several TV and film appearances, the last of which was for Gremlins in 1984.
Miller also narrated the original MGM Pink Panther shorts, cult television series Police Squad, the low-budget nightmare that was Electra Woman and Dyna Girl, and later MST3K experiment, The Deadly Mantis.
X Marks the Spot marks the first time MST3K aired a short that wasn't a chapter in a long-running film serial, like Commando Cody or The Phantom Creeps.
X Marks the Spot is also the only movie IMDb lists as produced by the New Jersey Department of Transportation, though they were specially thanked in a few episodes of The Sopranos.
The Joey the Lemur sketch references the infamous Johnny Carson bit where a marmoset pees on Carson's head. Joey doesn't panel well. This bit was so infamous it was recreated on The Larry Sanders Show.
In the Amazing Colossal episode guide, Kevin Murphy writes that the fans wrote in to say that the lemur in this movie is, well, actually, a kinkajou, a nasty little raccoon-like creature from the South American rainforest. He adds, Bob and Jane, thank you. We are now filled with deep shame. I hope you're satisfied.
I hate Joey the Lemur's new voice. During the iguana-alligator battle, Crow name-checks Mondo Cane.
I feel like I'm watching Mondo Cane.
Cane is a notorious 1962 documentary that indifferently filmed a number of staged animal-on-animal and man-on-animal violence, including a scene where a shark has sea urchins shoved in its throat.
God. Though Joel and the bots quip that the alien planet in this movie looks a lot like Wisconsin, it was mostly shot in Big Bear, California, with generous helpings of, surprise, Bronson Canyon.
The riff,
You conservative doctors.
Hey, we're neoconservative doctors.
I don't care.
Is a nod to the original new voice of right-wing American politics, which, in 1990, was especially concerned with greater pushing of strict Christian ideals, the family values era. Really makes you pine for simpler times when the right wing wasn't obsessed with raw milk, anime avatars, and unrestrained fascism.
Hey, Bardolators! Didn't get enough Shakespeare jokes in the last episode we looked at? Crow riffs on Hamlet again during the short as the bad driver and his guardian angel head to heaven.
Come on, let's go talk to Hamlet's dad.
Plus, the movie gets a riff from the Scottish play.
The scene opens with Macbeth pacing the stage. Suddenly, he walks upstage and addresses the audience.
Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow.
The riffing descends into self-parody at times, with Joel and Servo taking potshots at each other for recycling, and so-and-so as the beaver, and tastes like chicken as punchlines. Later, Crow tells them to knock it off because
I can't concentrate on my own lame wisecracks.
Hey, did you notice that there are only 4 actors in this film? Everyone else on the screen is stock footage. Everyone.
And that's time! Now, I may have been distracted somewhat by all of those crazy animals like the king dinosaur and, of course, the iguana that was covered in bristleboard. But the calamity of this whole movie was also the fault of a lady scientist, again.
Yeah, so some people might think we were a little bit hard on Robert Lippert, but frankly, this seems to be a running trope for him. Lady scientists ruin everything. So it actually got me thinking, because on the one hand, at least these movies are suggesting that a scientist could be a woman. I mean, to some extent, it's not even something that is challenged in this movie. It's just an accepted fact that 2 of these 4 astronauts are going to be women. But at the same time, they have all of these really negative stereotypes associated with them. They scream at the drop of a hat. They're completely useless in any kind of tense situation. They undermine men with their feminine wiles. They have silly things that they insist on doing. They have to be helped down ladders. It got me thinking about something that has come up recently in video game society, which I don't really have a lot to do with, but I find the controversies interesting around the new video game Cuphead. Have you heard of it?
Yeah. Cuphead was announced years ago, and it took so long to finish that I thought it was going to be the Chinese democracy of video games, but it finally came out.
Yeah, and it's gotten really great reviews, and its homage to kind of 1930s style animation is just gorgeous.
Yeah.
And the Flesher animation is really something to see. But, I mean, as a couple of articles have pointed out, it's kind of whitewashing over the fact that kind of the essence of these cartoons from the 30s is black minstrelsy, even down to why they're wearing gloves, because that's what people wore in minstrel shows in vaudeville. So it's a question about how much you can remove from that past, and if you're doing a disservice to history to sanitize that, or if you just try to take the things that you find aesthetically interesting and dumping all of the baggage, if that's really an ethical thing to do.
But the reason you bring this up is the response that protests to these depictions of specifically Black Americans, but also of minorities in general. I mean, no one got off light when it came to 1930s cartoons.
So the NAACP became a little bit more of a politically consequential body in the 50s and 60s, and they protested against these minstrel representations of Black people in cartoons. And all the studio's responses was just to stop representing Black people entirely. And, you know, it's a question of which one is worse, you know, and this is something from I found in literature, like the stuff we read is the stuff that just pretended that other people didn't exist, you know, like I can see why we don't read a lot of like colonial literature where you get all these negative stereotypes of people in the colonies, because it is really dreadful. But is it better that we mostly just read stuff that pretends that those people don't exist? And so this is a question, like, I really hate this movie. It's really hard for me as a woman who has had struggles to be taken seriously in professional settings, watch something like this. But at the same time, at least the idea of a lady scientist is not completely eliminated from the movie's possibilities, you know?
It's nice that there are women in the cast, you know? That's a lady who got paid. I mean, it's a Robert Lippert production, so she probably got paid $50. but still, it's a denigrating role that you have to make the most of. And, you know, not to add insult to injury, but I don't think anybody makes the most of this movie. The stock footage outacted everybody. Let's talk about something a lot more pleasant. And let's talk about the manliest art of all, alligator wrestling. Which sadly the iguana didn't do so well with, but there is a rubber alligator who is wrestled by one of the scientists, which is fairly amazing. I've always been a little bit of a rubbernecker when it comes to, you know, alligator wrestling, even though it's super cruel and unnecessary. If there is a video that someone links to that shows alligator wrestling, I will probably watch it. If just for the only cases where, like, when an animal is being mistreated, and maybe I'm not a nice person, it's been suggested, but I can't help but root for the animal in all those situations. And so there is one video, there won't be a link to this, it's terrible, but there's one video where a guy is prying a gator's mouth open and is showing off and sticking his head in there. But the gator only plays nice for so long and clamps down on his head and starts spinning around.
Yeah.
The guy makes it out okay.
Really?
But when you hear that snap and you hear the guy scream, it was like a stand up and cheer moment for me.
Yeah, well, serves you right, you dumbass.
Yeah, don't put your head into the mouth of a dangerous animal. Let him be.
Our producer Chris dropped me article that gave instructions on alligator wrestling, and I kind of resent the suggestion that I didn't already know how to do that.
Yes, because it features this noticeable header: Step 2, getting control of the mouth. And for a brief moment, I thought I was looking at an MRA dating site.
But anyway, I think I don't know, I watched a lot of Crocodile Hunter. It was a favorite in high school, and I just gotta, you know, there's definitely an approach you take. You jump on them from behind. They are very good at chomping down, but they have very weak muscles for opening back up. So as long as you can keep that mouth shut, you're pretty okay. Like a lot of reptiles, if you put something over their eyes, they can go quite docile. So just throw a blanket over them, and yeah,
they think it's nighttime.
Exactly.
You put on a Pure Mood CD, and you've got an alligator into submission.
But I mean, because alligators have such interesting bodies, like they're so old, they're older than dinosaurs. So in a lot of ways, you're looking at a very primitive body, and there's certain things it just cannot do. And so if you get on its back and you're able to shut its mouth down, then you're basically, you know, you won. It doesn't have any more tricks up its sleeve for you.
Yeah, but how do you get away?
Yeah, that's the article suggests jump backwards really fast.
Yeah, I that's never good advice when you're looking. You know, you've gotten to step 3, you're on the alligator, and what I've always seen in wrestling of gators, and I see it parroted in this article too, is that you're supposed to lift the head up, and that kind of gets them into submission, I guess, because you're putting them in the sleeper hold, as taught to me by WWF. But what? You're supposed to just like jump on the gator's heads like it's goddamn Pitfall Harry? Like, what the hell are you supposed to do?
So they didn't actually get into any alligator wrestling in this movie. They just gave the guy a rubber thing to noodle around with. But keep that in mind, listeners. Just try to clamp down that mouth. It's good for chopping, but not very good at opening back up.
Well, I think we've wrestled our last gator, and we have discussed all that we can about King Dinosaur, which, of course, prompts an even greater question. Chris, did we get anything from a listener asking a question of us?
We sure did. Listener Kelly from San Francisco wrote in to ask, what was the worst advice you got growing up?
Easy. Follow your dreams.
Yeah, I'd say the same.
Yeah, doesn't work out. Don't do it.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've ever wrestled an alligator, or if you'd like to, ask Beth and Adam anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, or we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. It's Just a Show is a podcast from Megaphonic FM. Find all our fancy little shows at megaphonic.fm. And thank you to all our Patreon supporters. You can support It's Just a Show and access some superfan bonus bits, including a bit that will make Adam's summary of the short a little clearer by going to itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today on It's Just a Show, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/18.
All right, well, we've detonated our atom bomb on this unsuspecting planet. What's coming up next?
Ho, ho, ho! The holiday season is coming up next. Have you been good little podcast hosts? You have? Excellent! Then look under the tree. That weird-shaped package that looks just like a giant gravy boat? That's right! It's Season 5, Episode 21, Santa Claus!
Oh, I suppose Hell got an NEA grant.
Oh, yay! This is the best of the 3 Christmas episodes.
Disagree. The best Christmas episodes were Santa Claus Conquers the Martians and, of course, a KTMA05 Gamera.
Looks like we're going to be at loggerheads on this one. I think Santa Claus Conquers the Martians is rather weak.
Ooh, way. Oh, man. All right, get ready for a real fight on air this Christmas. It'll just be like your unpleasant Christmases at home, listeners.
And on that note, until next time,
don't follow your dreams, especially you, Paul.
And also thank you to some people for giving us some lovely reviews on iTunes. And if there's anyone else out there who'd like to do the same for us, we'd really appreciate it.
Indeed. Okay, take it away, Theme Squad.
Everyone,